I am Reverend Dr. Cynthia Walters. I am an associate minister at Zion Baptist Church, and we are so excited and we are so happy to have all of you that have joined us this evening as we do a voting forum from the historic Zion Baptist Church, 801 Washington Street. We have been in existence over 155 years, and we are known as the bedrock of some of the civil rights movement here in Columbia, South Carolina. So hopefully tonight, unknowingly tonight, we will give you pertinent information. And our goal is that you really understand why it is important to vote, and that you will help us get people registered who are not registered. But more importantly, you will help us to get people out to the polls on November the 3rd, so we can show up and vote and do what we need to do. So before I turn it over to the moderator, I'd like to read a quick meditation, and it's called Harvest. It really spoke to my spirit this morning. Do you not say, there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for the harvest. And that's John 4:35. The Lord had a special burden for Samaria, this little territory north of Judah, inhabited by those who had survived the Assyrian invasion of 701 BC, and who had intermarried with pagan settlers. The Jewish leaders disparaged these people, but Jesus visited the region, told a parable about a good Samaritan, and directed his disciples to take the gospel there after his resurrection. In Acts 8, the evangelist Philip led a revival in this region. Paul and Barnabas also made a trip into the area. Jesus foresaw all this in John 4, when he led his disciples through a village in Samaria. There he sat by the well talking to an immoral woman, evangelizing her. Deeply moved, she went into the town and told everyone about him, and the town peoples returned to meet him. Jesus told the disciples that even though it wasn't harvest time, they were seeing a spiritual harvest. When others see riffraff, Jesus sees revival. Let's look at the world like that today, white for harvest. So when I saw that this morning, I thought, it's time to harvest the people. It's time for us to go to the polls. We need to look in every nook, every cranny, and make sure everyone is registered to vote, and everyone, more importantly, gets to that poll on November the 3rd, because the harvest is ripe. We have a work to do for November the 3rd. So that's my meditation this morning, this afternoon. Gosh, it's been a long day. And I would now like to turn it over to Susan Burrows, who will be our moderator this afternoon. She will introduce our panelists. Susan is a dear friend. She is the president of the South Carolina chapter of the National Association of Healthcare Services Executives. And one of our main purposes is to reduce disparities within the communities of colors, particularly African American, and particularly looking at healthcare. But I think as we think about voting, we think about COVID-19, we think about Black Lives Matters, we know that there are a lot of healthcare disparities and other disparities among communities of colors. So that's why it's so important that we get to the polls on November the 3rd and vote. So I will now turn it over to my good friend Susan. She will introduce the panel. We will talk until about 7:30, and then we will open it up for your questions and answers.
Thank you, Dr. Walters. Thank you for inviting me and allowing NACI to participate in this voting forum with Zion Baptist Church. So as Dr. Walters mentioned, we're going to now introduce our panelists. First, we have Mr. Antoine Seawright, who is a Democratic strategist and CBS commentator. Why don't you say a little something about yourself, Antoine? How did you get into this field? And tell us a little bit more about why this is so important for you to participate in this voting forum.
Well, thank you for having me. I learned a long time ago that Antoine Seawright will either be at the table or on the menu. And if people are going to be making decisions about me, my life, my community, things that will impact my family, my friends, and even my enemies, I want to be a part of the decision-making process. And so I decided to make sure that where there was not a seat, I decided to break into the room and find myself a seat. And by grace, mercy, relationships, friendships, and what I know now is just pure assignment and purpose from God, I am where I am, hopefully, to do everything we need to do.
Awesome, thank you. And now we'll hear from Miss Cynthia Watson, our Democratic Field Chair for Richland County. Tell us a little bit about why this voting forum is so important to you and why you're participating this evening.
Well, you know, we've heard over and over that this is probably the most important election in our lifetimes. And so it's just an honor to be here, and thank you so much for the invitation. You know, I got the bug early on when I was a college student as a freshman at Columbia College, and campaigning. I'm dating myself as a young volunteer for Governor Dean Riley. Some of you may not even remember who he was. And also, you know, it's really, you know, I love the way that God connects the dots. We have, you know, Jennifer Clyburn Reed here. I also volunteered for her father many moons ago when I was just a young person. And so, you know, I consider it community service. It's our civil right to exercise that right to vote, and also educate others as it relates to the importance of voting. So many people have struggled and died for that right to do so, and I honor my ancestors in that way.
Awesome, thank you. And now we'll hear from Dr. Jennifer Clyburn Reed, Richland One educator and community voter advocate. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why it's so important for you to participate in the voting forum this evening.
Well, thank you for having me, and it is my honor to be here this evening. I'll start with why it is important for someone like me to participate in forums like this. I am a lifetime educator. I've been teaching in education for 28 years. So many of the decisions that are made for educators are not made by educators. Therefore, it is extremely important for us to have a seat at the table. And as Shirley Chisholm said, if they don't make a space for you, you pull up a chair and make your own space. So that is why I think it's important for educators, real career educators, to be present in these forums, pulling up a seat at the table so that our voices are heard. Education impacts everyone. It doesn't miss anyone. So it's extremely important for us to be in these spaces.
Awesome, thank you. So now let's get into some of the questions that have been prepared for us this evening. One of the things I wanted to ask you all that we've heard from many people across the nation that have said that this election is the election of a lifetime. Talk to us a little bit about that from your perspective. Let us understand, why is it an election of a lifetime? Cynthia, we'll start with you.
Well, thank you. Well, one of the things that this pandemic has taught us is that elections have consequences. Let's just say that. And while we're all focused on doing what we can to stay safe and healthy, we also have our eyes on, you know, on election day. We have a highly contested Senate race, for example, where Jamie Harrison and Lindsey Graham. And the reason why, and Antoine mentioned, and so did Jennifer, these elections are very important. With the way unemployment is, we had a senator who didn't want to extend unemployment benefits. And so we need to vote, or I encourage people to vote who have our best interests at heart, but not only have our best interests at heart, but have an interest of what is going on in our communities, essentially what's in our backyards. Because if there was no extension, that affects my household, that affects the people I go to church with. It also impacts our economy. And so when we say that this election is an important election, it really is.
Awesome, awesome. Let's see, Dr. Jennifer Reed.
When I think about what your question is asking about the education of a lifetime. So I think about life and our quality of life. So I would be remiss if I did not mention the importance of the census. That census counts that determines the funding and our representation for the next 10 years. We must get our fair share so that we don't have additional hospitals closing in our state. We've had 4 in rural areas close. Healthcare is at a turning point. We have unemployment, as Ms. Watson mentioned, that is in a place where it's just unfathomable on how people are making a way, and that quality of life is not what it needs to be. We also live in a state where Medicaid expansion was not taken. Mm-hmm. And the ramifications of that has been devastating for us. So I do have to mention that filling out that census form brings those dollars to our state so that we get the money allocated to us. It's like the allowance for South Carolina that comes from the federal government. Well, we deserve to have all of the allowances that's coming to us. So hopefully we get better percentages on that. And yes, it is the election of a lifetime, because if we don't choose wisely, we will suffer serious consequences in all aspects of our life.
Awesome, thank you. Antoine, why is this election of the lifetime for you, from your perspective?
I'm 35 years old. I am the grandson of sharecroppers from Swansea, South Carolina. I tell people that although my mother and father did not go to anybody's college, they were better than my grandparents' generation because at least they could spell college. And I'm fortunate enough to have graduated from college. But the thing about all that is, when I look back where I am in my life now, and some of the discussions I heard growing up in rural Swansea, and even some of the discussions I hear now living in Lower Richmond, they're still the same. Still the struggles about healthcare, still the struggles about education, infrastructure, jobs, wages, equal pay for equal work, making education equitable for everyone. All the things you can imagine that I heard from my grandparents, the struggles of their generation, are the same struggles of our generation. To think about this election more so than any elections I've ever been involved in. And I've done 4 presidential elections in my life and over 300 and some odd campaigns, is that this one will dictate not just the next 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years. This one will dictate the next 30 or 40 or 50 years in this country. And let me tell you what I mean. And the truth of the matter is, Donald Trump has already appointed over 180 judges to the federal courts, upper and lower courts. Those will go beyond whenever Trump leaves that White House. He's appointing young, white, conservative judges who are in their 30s, late 30s, and early 40s, who will be there for the next 40 or 50 years. Election of our lifetime. When you think about some of the policy changes his administration has implemented by way of executive order or some of the things he and Mitch McConnell have decided to do to roll back that Barack Obama and Joe Biden implemented, those have generational impact. When you look at the response to the two pandemics we are living through in this country, the racial pandemic that we all know, if you look like us, and has followed all of us for a very long time, or COVID-19, the worst health pandemic since 1918. If you look at the response to both of those things, that has generational impact. And what I think people forget, yes, the presidency is so important. And trust me when I tell you, as somebody who worked for Hillary Clinton twice, nobody wants to beat Donald Trump more than me. But this election is not just about the top of that ticket. It's about on down that ballot, from Jamie Harrison on down to county council races, because whoever wins state legislative races in this country will determine the temperature and tone of this country for the next 10 years. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris win the White House and Mitch McConnell is still the leader of the Senate, all the things we need to do will not get done, because they're going to do to us what they did to Barack Obama in his last 4 years and block everything he tried to do, including adding judges to the bench. So when you hear people talk about the urgency of this election, it's bigger than Donald Trump, it's bigger than Democrat versus Republican. This is literally about the nerve center of this country for the next 40 to 50 years. That's why what we did in 2018 was so important. I went around the country with Jennifer Fowler and Mr. Clyburn. We targeted 42 races around this country because we knew if we did not have the majority at this moment in history right now, there would be no checks and balances on the executive branch. Can you imagine if Jim Clyburn was not the highest ranking African-American member of the U.S. Congress, if Nancy Pelosi was not the speaker? Can you imagine what Donald Trump would be doing right now? And we were in the middle of this pandemic and trying to make sure that people look like us and communities like ours just survive. Imagine what that would look like. Well, take that scenario with your wonderful imagination and transfer that to 4 more years of Donald Trump and 6 more years of Mitch McConnell. Just imagine the hole we would be in. Forget about the country, as Black people in this country. People have been left out and left behind since the start of this country. Imagine what that would look like. That's why this election is so personally important for me.
Awesome, awesome. So now let's unpack a little bit about some of the things that are happening on the national level. What should we be concerned with on the national level when we vote? Platforms, policies, national appointments. You've mentioned the 6+4. That's where we get that 10-year impact. And how should some of the national politicians impact us locally? We'll start with you, Dr. Reed. Last time I started with Cynthia.
Okay. Well, Antoine has done a fabulous job of unpacking what the picture, the big picture, what it looks like on the national level. So I'll echo some of the things that he said and give my perspective as well. But first, he started with the judicial appointments. And I just want to make sure our participants pay attention to that number that he gave. 180 judges. Now, let's think about the role of a judge. When you go to court and you want the verdict to come in your favor, it really does make a difference who is on that bench. So if you have the appointments that the current president has had and you come before that judge, you are not going to get the justice that you deserve, because that is not in the design. So that's number one. And those of you out there who have had experience in the judicial system, you know exactly what we're talking about if you come up to in the wrong courtroom. The one other thing that you mentioned was education and infrastructure. And that brings us to broadband and having access to the internet in your homes. I cannot tell you, if those of us right now, we are together right now because we have access to the internet. Our children, because of this pandemic, now have to go to school like we are right now in this meeting. But what if they don't have the internet? So those families, those children have not been in school since March of 2020. It is now September. It is not fair. And it is up to us to make sure that our communities are taken care of and that they meet the standards that everybody else's children can meet. Otherwise, like Antoine said earlier, they are at not the starting line, they're behind the starting line and have much farther to a road to make up. And that's just not what we need to do as responsible adults.
Awesome, thank you. Cynthia, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I don't have much to add. I mean, Antoine and Jennifer really have unveiled the key issues of really what's facing the Democratic Party and specifically African Americans. But one other thing that's a big concern for me, and it's been coming heavily from the Republican Party or this current administration, is voter suppression. And so that's one of the things that we need to be clear about, is a confusion about how to vote, where to vote, attacking the U.S. Postal Service. Those are, that's voter suppression, and we need to be cognitive of how this reads, to especially to our community, and that confusion that surrounds that. And so one of the things that we need to do just as a party and as a people is to make sure that we continue to have platforms like this, that make sure that the information that we are receiving is accurate and it's coming from a good source. That's the most important part. So all these things, voter suppression is it's really an issue with me right now with 55 days out. So grateful for platforms like this.
Awesome, awesome. Antoine, your thoughts?
Well, there are two things that I am overly concerned about. First and foremost, she just said it, voter suppression. Look, we've been experiencing it as Black people since the days when we were marching, trying to just having the right to participate. And now it seems like that effort to suppress our vote has gone on steroids. In 2013, after 2008, when we saw record African-American turnout, something happened in this country, starting in the South. They implemented voter suppression laws called voter ID. Some cases were won at the courts, i.e. the importance of the courts that I just mentioned. Some were lost. In South Carolina, we lost. You have to have a federal issued ID. We know disproportionately who that impacts. It impacts seniors, people of color, and young people. The coalition that elected Barack Obama. Fast forward the tape to 2013, when the Supreme Court gutted Section 4. When they gutted Section 4 to deal with Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, as a result, they got rid of something called pre-clearance. Before 2013 court decision, legislatures around the country had to get permission before they can close precincts, move precincts, do away with early voting laws, purge voter rolls. When all that out of the window, they opened up the floodgates of voter suppression. So let me tell you what happened. In Georgia, they started purging voter rolls. That's part of the reason Stacey Abrams is not the first Black woman governor in this country. In Florida, they implemented a poll tax. If you're a little bit older than me, or more seasoned than me, sorry, then you know what a poll tax is. In places like Wisconsin, North Dakota, and South Dakota, they start rejecting people's ballots because the signature did not line up between their ID and what they signed when they went to go vote. So voter suppression is what I constantly worry about. And then when you are in the middle of a pandemic, and we know that if we show up to vote in line, we run the risk of getting COVID and possibly dying because this virus has impacted us disproportionately. They know that, and so they're ratcheting up their efforts to suppress our vote. That's why we have to be very forceful and strong about vote by mail in this election. That's why we have to remind people to vote early, and that's why we have to remind people to stay in line. If your precinct is moved, we got to get the information out. most importantly, we got to participate like we never participated before. That's voter suppression. I'm concerned about that. The second thing I'm concerned about is disinformation or misinformation. My mother would call it lies, but she would tell me not to use that word in public. The truth of the matter is, part of the reason Donald Trump is president because of outside interference from foreign actors like Russia that targeted low propensity voters, i.e. Black voters who are not likely to participate, and sent them information about Hillary locked people up because of the '94 crime bill, or just sent them flat out lies on the internet. We took that information, digested it, passed it around our communities, and so for the first time in 20 years, African American participation was down in the 2016 election. We've got to be woke, but we cannot be woke to the point that we're drunk off misinformation or disinformation. So that means we got to pay attention. That means we got to talk to each other. That means we got to make sure we're not passing around information that's simply not true. Because let me tell you, we can have healthcare, we can have infrastructure, we can have education, we can have all those things as issues we need to deal with in our community. But if we do not show up, if we do not vote like we've never voted before, the solution to those problems will not ever come. And as a result, as Bill Clinton told me when I was a youngster in politics, he says, losers do not legislate. Jennifer's father, my mentor, my political father, Jim Clyburn, says it a different way. He says, you cannot govern if you do not win. And so we've got to win elections in order to deal with the challenges that have taken over our community for a very long time.
Awesome. Okay, so we've talked about access. We've talked a little about voter suppression and broadband access. Talk to us a little bit about how do we address these things locally, because a lot of those things are impacting us locally, surely on a national level. But what are some of your thoughts about how we could address that? Who wants to go first?
I mean, I'll go. In regards to the voter suppression, because that's really huge with me. I was telling someone the other day that their family really needs to have a household voting plan, and they looked at me like, what's a household voting plan? And basically, that is, we need to be proactive, and we need to make sure, how we're voting. I don't mean who you're voting for, but are we going to vote an absentee ballot? Are we going to be in person absentee? Are we voting on election day? Do we know our precinct? Do we need a ride to the polls? Do we need a babysitter? Does mom need to go earlier in the day and dad stays home, or someone stays home? But we really need to have a voting plan, and that includes having masks. Are you prepared for long lines, inclement weather, and so on? And so while a household voting plan may sound strange to some, but it's something that we need to integrate into our families. We need to encourage, our friends, our coworkers, the coalition of base of people, any organization that we are a part of. And I know it may seem minute, but this is strategic. And so that's one of the things that, I'm doing. I'm sharing that with other people, because that is something simple that someone else can take to another family member, to their neighbor, to their the person that they go to church with. So that's the biggest thing for me, is making sure that we get ourselves to the polls.
Awesome.
And I just want to piggyback on what you said, Cynthia. That was absolutely so true. You need to know what you're going to do on voting day, whatever voting day you choose. So I want to make sure that we have that right date for in-person absentee. Looks like October 5th is probably going to have to be the day, because we have a runoff election here in Richland County. So that's going to throw off, I think, what they wanted to do starting in the end of September. So October 5th is definitely the first day of in-person absentee voting. And if that is any time in October, Congressman has said, let's make October election month. Yes, we have an election day on November 3rd, but let's make October election month. So choose one of those days starting on October 5th to plan how it is that you and your family members will vote. The second thing is adopt a precinct. Many of us are part of organizations, whether they're sororities, fraternities, social clubs. Have those members adopt a precinct right in their area, which means you get the list of people in that precinct and make sure that everyone who is registered in that precinct goes to vote. Give them a call, stop by, distance, definitely stop by the house. And we're not going to be able to give rides to the polls like we did in prior elections. It's going to have to be done a little differently and definitely in a more safe manner. But if we just take a little bit of the puzzle, take a little piece of the puzzle, we can increase what Antoine pointed out earlier about the lower turnout in 2016. If we can just take a little piece of that puzzle and be in charge of that little piece, we can get voters out to the polls to vote. And the third thing I wanted to talk about was fighting fatigue. Many of us watch the news and just get tired. Many of us, as Antoine pointed out about the misinformation, we're just tired. However, you have to pull from within to fight the fatigue so that we can get what it is that we need. It's a sacrifice that we have to make. Not unlike the sacrifices those who fought for the right to vote had to make. Just a different type of sacrifice, but a sacrifice in the same.
Awesome. Antoine, your thoughts?
You talk about how do we, I guess, create the conversation around the importance of the local elections. I would just say we elevate the urgency around what this election means from the top to the bottom of the ballot. I would like to remind people, particularly young people, when I'm giving a talk about elections in general, I remind people of what I learned from my first political job when I was in high school. And I heard old preacher say, during a revival, we call it a big meeting where I'm from, and he was talking about the election. And he said, the closer your government is to you, the more important it is for you. So when your child gets in trouble at school, you can't call your congressman, you have to call your school board member. When your trash is not picked up and you live in the county, you got to call your county council person. If you got trash issues, you live in the city, you got to call your city council person. Same thing with crime, same thing with issues as relates to your solicitor's office. You name the local office, it's impacted. When your roads are not getting paid, you don't call the White House, you have to call your state legislature, your county council person. So we have to create the why, the how, and who around these local offices. Because I think people get so confused about who they call on for what and what they call on for who. And so I think we have to create the urgency around that and the relevancy. But we also have to remind people that we all can participate. I grew up 5th generation AME, but I'm pretending to be a Baptist tonight because my mama was a Baptist. And since we're St. John, I'm going to be a Baptist tonight for Cynthia Walters. But we have to remind people about every single election is that they have impact. And everyone will participate in different ways. There's a point in the service, whether you're Baptist or AME, and which they say, this is the point in the service where everybody can participate. But we're at the point in our democracy where everybody can participate. And you don't have to run for office. You don't have to manage a campaign. You may not do what I do. You may not do what Jennifer or Cynthia does. But you can vote. You can show up at your city council, county council, at the state house. You can make sure people around you are registered. You can make sure people are informed and not misinformed. And you can also create the urgency around the election of what issues that matter to you. Because chances are, if access to healthcare matters to you, chances are it's going to matter to your uncle and the guy on the corner of the street who washed cars over at the laundromat for $10. And so we just got to talk to people and meet people where they are. Sometimes as Democrats in particular, we get too cute about how we talk about issues and how we reach people. We've got to get out of that business, and we've got to stop doing business as usual and focus on unusual business. And that means meeting people where they are to get our community where we need to be.
Okay. So there's been mention of obtaining access to a precinct list. Talk to us a little bit. How do we get access to that? Let's talk to our Zion Baptist Church attendees here. Tell us a little bit about how we can take action on that.
Well, there are partnerships being created with some of our allies and partners on the Adopt a Precinct program. Last week, Whip Cliver and I joined a call with the Divine Nine that was hosted by the AKAs, and we talked about Adopt a Precinct, what Adopt a Precinct is, and we did this in Alabama to elect Doug Jones in a very pivotal election. What it means is your church, your sorority, your civic group, your community group, your tennis club. What it simply means is you all, the precinct you live in or precinct that you want to embrace, you work with party leaders and you get a list of the people in that precinct, and you take responsibility for, one, making sure they are registered, two, making sure that they know it's an election, three, they know about the details of the election, i.e. when you can vote, who you're voting for, what you're voting for, and four, to make sure that they show up to vote. And even if that means making sure they have a ride to the polls, if they're experiencing some issues, and you apply the old Southern Carpenters rule, measure twice and cut once as it relates to every single person in that precinct. And if we take that model, as we did in Alabama to elect Doug Jones, and as we did around the country in 2018 to get us this fragile majority we have in the Congress, I am totally convinced not only can we change South Carolina, but we can change this country. And it's simply just working with some of the resources and some of the people around you who are willing and able to help you to do that. Elections are about coalitions and constituencies. And when everybody takes a responsibility in the participation part, then we can really make generational change, not just in the state, but in this country.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit. How do we engage some of our young people?
You're asking me or you're asking somebody else?
Any of you.
Oh.
I think Antoine touched on that a little bit earlier, and I'll let him talk about that again. I just want to say, since I'm coming off of a stint at the University of South Carolina, to engage young people in this process, it is meeting them where they are. I was, and Cynthia spoke about it with her, in college. We were involved in the political party of our choice on college campuses. Not everybody does that, but you know, we did that. So the way we approach being a part of this process is not the way some other people would approach it. So one thing we all had in common, though, we had to pay tuition. Okay, so when your tuition is increased every year, who makes that determination? Okay, now you have school board members that you need to talk to. You have legislators who fund colleges and universities. How is that equitably split up between the colleges? So in order for young people to participate actively in this process, I think you have to show them how it impacts their life financially, emotionally, having opportunities. And when they get out of college, jobs need to be available so that they can sustain themselves and build a family of their own. So showing them how voting for the right person to represent you would impact your life from pillar to post. Young people will get involved once they are informed.
Awesome, awesome. Dr. Walters, I believe you had a question. You're still on mute?
You,
One of the questions that came in, number one, there have been several comments just thanking you for being a part of this forum tonight, all the panelists, and how much they appreciate you giving up of your time to be here with us. The question is, how do we prepare ourselves to vote, and how do we know where to vote on election day?
That's pretty simple. Cynthia, I'll let you take a stab at it since I've talked a lot.
No, that's fine. All I was going to say, and I'm sure you're going to pretty much say the same thing, is that, you know, what I have here is a sample ballot. Go to scvotes.org and pull up a sample ballot. And when you do that, it lets you know exactly who's on the ticket, who are you voting for. It's got the president and vice president, Senate, House of Representatives, State Senate. I'm in District 79. So, you know, in my district, for school district, we actually have 10 people. So as Jennifer was saying, as it relates to education, now I can only pick for, you know, 3 of these people, but these are the people that will impact the school district that the children attend, you know, in my area. So I encourage everyone, and make this actually a part. Jennifer, thanks for putting that up on the website, but make this a part of your household voting plan. Go there and, you know, and pull it up and encourage everyone to do so. This is a great place to start.
And one thing we will be doing, I just got some information, and we're doing this at Zion Baptist Church, but there's a link called www.blackchurch75.com. And you can go to that website and you can put in your name, your address, and it will tell you if you are registered to vote or not. And if you are not registered, it will give you the particulars for the state you're in. My question is, there's been some information about if you have not voted in the last election that you will not be able to vote. So talk to us so that we know when we go to the polls, we are eligible to vote, because apparently people have voted in the past and they dropped off the rolls. That's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me, with all due respect, that's a lie, and that's part of the misinformation that's out there. Once you're registered, unless you change address for whatever reason, you're still registered. Now, part of this is personal responsibility. I know my voter registration information like I know my social security number, like I check on my credit report. And so the first and most important thing I think all of us need to do is to check our status. If you've moved since the first time you registered to vote, and if your address you don't think or you suspect doesn't line up between your driver's license and the address that you may have registered to vote in, then you need to be taking a look at that. You need to make your way down to your local election commission office to make sure you get registered and get those things to line up, because you can't give people a reason to turn you around at the voting booth. We can't be in that business. The urgency is too much. But this idea that you're being purged in the rolls, that's not real. That's a lie. That has happened in some places, but it has not happened in South Carolina, thankfully, because we've been able to block and tackle to prevent that. But we also just have to have a little personal responsibility. Yes, we can do these forms until November 2nd at 7 p.m. But if you all don't take the responsibility to know your information and know who you're voting for, then these forms really don't matter. It'll just be conversation that we just had, and everybody had a good time and good fellowship. So part of this, Rob Bass said it takes 2 to make the thing go right. I know we at the Baptist Church, but part of it is making sure that we do our part, but you also have to do your part too.
Okay. Thank you, Dr.
Before, Susan, if you wouldn't mind, just
Sure.
a few things. I know I can't share my screen, I don't think, because I'm not one of you, but scvotes.org. I did put that comment I saw where I put it to the panelists and not the attendees, so I changed that. So if you would go to scvotes.org, you can click on Find My Polling Place, check my voting status. Everything is there for you to do exactly what Antoine just told you to do and what Cynthia just recommended you to do, to check that ballot. Everything is listed there so that you will know your status. If you haven't voted, if you've never voted before and don't know if you're registered, it has a link there for you to check your status. So please, it takes 3 minutes. Please check your status. And if it is not there and you are not showing up, then you know that you need to register, and there's a button there for you to register to vote and do that.
One other question, Susan, was if you have been incarcerated and now are released, can you vote?
Depending on your, go ahead, John.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, John.
If you have completed, from what I read, and that's on South Carolina votes.org too, in the frequently asked questions. And from what I read from there, if you have finished all of your, the time served, parole, probation, everything is complete, then you are now restored as a South Carolina voter.
Yes, but you also have to go back and re-register to vote.
You do have to register.
Yeah. You're not automatically restored as a voter. You have to make sure you go back and register to vote. So it's so important that you just make sure. And then guess what? There's nothing wrong. If you're in doubt, fill it out. If you're in doubt about your status, fill it out. Fill out that registration form, because the worst thing they can do is mail you another voter registration card. So when in doubt, fill it out.
We talked a little bit earlier about having that household voting plan. What are some of your thoughts about how can the Black Church or AME Church, how do we make sure that we're getting that information out to the parishioners, being that some of us are live streaming and we're in this COVID environment? How do we make it plain for folks to understand how to do something like that, and so that we can engage our families?
Well, this is very personal to me, because I spent most of my career working on faith outreach components. And let me just tell you, just because we're not in church doesn't mean the business of church has stopped. And just as if the preacher gets up on Sunday morning, and I come from a long line of them, and they talk about the goodness of Jesus, we've got to talk about the goodness of our vote. And I appreciate tonight, because most people have Wednesday night Bible study tonight. So they have a pre-captured audience. You all are taking the time that would have been a traditional Bible study night to do this. I'm old enough to know about the Vacation Bible School scripture that tell us that the people rejoice when the righteous are in charge. If you are a believer like I am, and you believe in the gospel, you know that there are not too many people rejoicing right now because some of the leaders we have in this country. One of my heroes, the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass, said, I prayed for 20 years and my prayers are not answered until I move my feet. In other words, we can pray for change all we want, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and go back and do it again. But until we work with our prayers may not necessarily work. And so we have to get out of this idea that we can't do politics from the pulpit. That's our history as Black people. That's particularly my history as a fifth generation AME. When they did not want us to gather, we gathered, we did church, but we also strategized and energized our community. And we have to just adopt some of the things that got us over, got us through. We have to just bring that back to the forefront. And yes, preachers can get up on Sunday morning, remind people about the stakes of this election, whether you're in person or not. And they also can remind people who they decide to vote for. Now, they may not can tell you that Zion Baptist Church is voting such and such and such, but as the pastor, there's nothing illegal about him telling his congregation, whether it's on Zoom or not, about who he's voting for some of the people on the ballot. And guess what? There's not anything wrong with inviting candidates to come to give a word during your virtual Zoom service on Sunday morning, Facebook Live, or whatever you do. And so we can't let the system hoodwink us or fool us that we can't do what we've always done to get results that we need to get. Our churches are still the nerve center of our community. It's still the most trusted news source you can imagine for our community, and we've got to use the resources available to us to get through to us.
Awesome, awesome.
Can I piggyback on that, Susan?
Sure, please.
What I wanted to say, and Antoine is really spot on with this. And so one of the things that's been really successful with campaigns is, you know, phone banking and text banking. And guess what? You have a list, you have a roster of folks that attend your church. You can actually phone bank and text bank within your own church, just reminding people, you know, are you a registered voter? How are you voting? And sending them links to scvotes.org. So there's some things that we can do internally within our church without crossing any lines, as Antoine, you know, spoke about. But the church is who we are. It's always been who we are.
That's
and
right.
So being able to even take some of those techniques that we use on campaigns and bring that within the church, just to text to your members.
Right.
That's helpful. That's really helpful.
And Cynthia, let me just say, there has not been an election won at the national level or the local level without coming through the Black church.
There you
Hello.
go.
And that's how you know
Amen.
the effectiveness of not just our vote and our voices, but the collective idea of the Black church. And we can't underestimate that or let other people undermine that. That's why you see people trying to break that up, because they know the power, the collective power we have as the Black church. And for every pastor or preacher or faith leader who may be on the Zoom tonight and may think I'm crazy, let me also say to you that part of what I believe God requires of us to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly. Part of doing justly is making sure your parishioners are informed about what's going on around them, because real church happens when you leave those walls on Sunday morning. And we can scream, shout, and yell, and preach to ourselves into a frenzy on Sunday. But if Mary or Antoine can't pay their light bill on Monday, what happened on Sunday really doesn't resonate the same way. And so people lose faith in their God and they lose faith in the system. And so we've got to figure out how to merge the two together to make sure we help shape what this more perfect union looks like.
And I just wanted to add to what both of the other panelists said. We have to not fall for they said. So just like you can stand, the pastor can stand and say, we need to get out the vote. Here are your registration forms. You know, we have this voter registration drive going on. Those things can occur. It is not illegal, but what they are doing is putting these suppressive ideas out in the atmosphere so that we back up off the importance of the Black church and the voice of the Black church. And we cannot allow that to happen. And in order to do that, we have to know what the rules are so that they said is irrelevant.
Now, we did talk a little bit about some of our communities having access issues, and then there was mention of transportation. What are some of your ideas about how we can get around that, or how we can help each other out, maybe through some of the auxiliaries through the church, or how can Zion be more engaged around that in helping the parishioners that have those particular issues?
I think they can do a number of things. One, I think they can do what we just talked about, that's informing the people in their community. But two, I think we have to understand that it takes a village to win elections. And if Zion, or Bedside Baptist, Pillarside Baptist, or whoever may not have church vans or have the resources to help get people to the polls, then they can partner with other groups to help make sure that people who are in need get what they need. So even if that means helping get bus tickets, even if that means Uber rides, even if that means cab vouchers, even if that's working with other churches that may be bigger and have more resources to get the word out. I think we have to find synergy and come together in our community so we can help fix and heal our community. Because there had not been an election going on in South Carolina in which churches have not offered their vans to help go to the high rise in some of the challenged communities in the state to help get people to the polls, to help our seniors get to the polls. There hadn't been a church I know that I've asked or talked to that has not been willing to make sure seniors have someone to help them, fill out their ballot or making sure they're not filling out the wrong thing. All those things. And I think we just have to take those same efforts and energy, but just really put them on steroids because this election is far more important, as we said earlier, than anyone we've ever had before. And the chance for misinformation and disinformation is even higher because we're living in a pandemic. We're already seeing in North Carolina where they're mailing what looks like a voting mail ballot, but it's actually something from Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So they're making people think in certain communities they're mailing in their election ballot or requesting their ballot when they're really not. And I just think we have to make sure that we help people who are in need.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
And
there's
I would also add to start collecting that Lysol spray and wipes so that if you use the church vans, when you use the church vans and individual cars and things like that, then you will have enough of those septic wipes and things like that so that people can stay safe and clean. And also the disposable mask for everyone who gets in a car with someone else.
Okay.
Susan,
Sounds great.
I was just gonna say we're coming up on the 7:30 hour where we're gonna open it up. If you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And I don't know, Deacon Brown is running our MTech ministry tonight, so I don't know if we can see people and if they can ask questions. But if you have questions and we can't let you in, please put them in the chat box. And I have one question I think is very important. Last time we were confused about the popular vote versus the electoral college. Please explain that.
Antoine, that's you.
Yeah, Antoine, we're gonna have to hand that one over to you.
Well, let me first ask y'all to pray for me because I still have political PTSD from the 2016 election. Because I was on TV that night, ready to pull off my Superman jacket and my shirt saying we just elected the first woman as the president of the United States. And I left the studio that night in tears and in disbelief because Hillary Clinton had 3 million more votes than Donald Trump, but yet she is not the president of the United States. And so what I have been saying for the past 3.5 years, yes, we have to win the popular vote because that matters for candidates down the ballot in some of these places, but we also have to win the electoral college. And most of the time, the electoral college is determined by 7, maybe 8 states: North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin. This year is totally different because we have a totally different candidate. So the race is going to look totally different. And while I know everybody is so excited about these polls and they're seeing all these national polls and it looks good, but guess what? As someone who is living proof of political PTSD, the same poll said the same thing in 2016 this time around. And yes, Hillary Clinton won all the national polls when it was all said and done, but she did not win the electoral college. And so we have to just make sure that we not only turn out in South Carolina up and down the ballot for Jamie and others, but we got to encourage our friends in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, some of these battleground places to show up, show out too. Because each one of those states I just mentioned, they determine the electoral college almost any given presidential cycle. But here's the interesting thing about it. In all those states, the margins were less than 10,000 votes that Hillary Clinton lost by. So just imagine if 10,000 more of our brothers and sisters, and even those of the lighter hue, would have shown up to vote in that election, we'd be having a totally different conversation about this country.
Awesome. Do we have any questions in the chat? Anybody
Here's,
coming
here's one. What are valid forms of ID when we show up at the polls?
Jennifer, you're muted.
Oh,
Hey, you good now? Yeah.
You're good.
can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I was just saying, I wish I could share my screen because it has,
Well, I can just tell you. If you
okay,
can't
you
figure
have
it
the
out.
list, it's a long list.
Well, yeah, you can definitely, the safest one is your driver's license, right? Most of us have a driver's license. If you don't have a driver's license, if you have a state or federal issued ID, then that will pass the muster test. Now, unfortunately, you can't use your badge to get you into work. You can't use your fake ID that might have got you into the club if you're a young person. You have to have a legit state or federal issued ID in order to vote in any given election in the state. And for people who go to church on Sundays and may be involved in church, I'm sorry, but your deacon or your deaconess badge will not work either. You have to have a state or federal issued ID in order to vote in the election. But let me just say this. No one can deny you your right if you don't have your ID. You simply will be pulled to the side. You sign a little form called an affidavit. And all that does, it says that you are who you say you are by voting. They will look at those after the election and determine whether it's a pass or fail. So don't let anybody turn you around. However, don't give white people reason to turn you around or to question your authenticity. Show up with your driver's license or your state issued ID. You got to have it. You need to cash a check. You need to do both things. Just show up with those things and make it easy.
And I found what I was looking for, Antoine. So it is in the chat for panelists and attendees. I cut and pasted that, the list of proper photo IDs necessary to vote. And that's called, did you say provisional ballot? Did you tell them to ask?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And some of these IDs, as Jennifer put in the chat box, are the valid South Carolina driver's license, a South Carolina Department of Motor Vehicles ID card, a United States passport, your voter registration card with the photo if you have that, federal military ID, Department of Defense photo ID, and the Department of Veteran Affairs benefit card. And we will capture all of this and make sure Zion Baptist Church and others are aware of these different types of ID. Now, Anton, they're still confused about the Electoral College. Is that a group of people sitting in these states voting based on?
No, the Electoral College, each state is allocated a number designated by the Electoral College based on their population. So
Okay,
the bigger the state, the more the Electoral College votes.
okay,
And so just to do away with all the confusion, just vote. If
Yeah.
you vote, the Electoral College will take care of itself. If you
Itself.
don't vote, then you got to be guessing and asking me questions about the Electoral College.
okay. Another question is, can you vote online in South Carolina?
No.
Okay.
No.
That, let your yes be yes and your no be no. That was no.
No.
We also talked about our church vans as modes of transportation. The question is, are there organizations out there that provide transportation if your church does not or you do not have transportation?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll take
Yeah.
that. Oh, go ahead, Antoine. Or well, I was
No, you
just
go
going to say that the South Carolina Democratic Party has a Ride to the Polls initiative. And so if your church wants to call, any organization that wants to call, or any individual that wants to call to get information or even volunteer to take on a shift to help with getting folks in your precinct, in your area, in your county to the polls, they are more than happy to assist you. In fact, they'll be very happy to get that phone call.
And let me just say, some corporate folks I've worked with, my firm has worked with in the past, are also going to be engaged in this election. Lyft and Uber in some places, and we're working on South Carolina, are going to be offering free rides to the polls for people in certain areas of certain states. So I hope that we can get that going here in South Carolina.
And they've done that in the past, Antoine, so I really hope you can lobby them to continue that. That's really helpful.
Yep.
Are there any additional questions, Dr. Walters?
I don't have any questions in the chat, and some of the church members are blowing up my cell phone with questions, but I think I've asked most of those. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat box, or for those of you that have my cell phone, you can type in your question and I will ask it for you.
Awesome. So as a recap, we've talked about elevating the urgency. We've talked about having a household voting plan. We've talked about a strong ground game. In other words, being prepared ahead of time, planning ahead. We talked about using October as the month to get it going. This is September now, so we should be making plans, right? We talked about engaging educators and those in our parishioners. And we talked about the Ride to the Polls initiative. What haven't we talked about? What haven't we touched upon? What else is out there that we need to make sure that we let the people know about?
Well, there was a question that just popped up about the Latino vote, and the answer is yes. We are lobbying, we are working, we are energizing and galvanizing consequential communities. That for me means Black and brown people, because when Black and brown people show up, this country has a way of showing out. And that's how we elected Barack Obama twice. That's how we elected 2 terms of Bill Clinton. And so while the players may have changed, the playbook has not changed. So yes, we're doing that. But let me, because I do have to run in a second, but let me just remind people about the power of our vote. And I say our vote, people who look like us. Thank God for Cynthia, Jennifer, and others who look like my mother, my sister, my niece, and my grandmother, because Black women have been the political glue holding this country together for a very long time. Unfortunately, in 2016, 13% of Black men showed up to vote for Donald Trump. Since 2017, January, I've spent so much of my time going around this country, making sure that Black men understand the consequences of their vote in 2016 so they do not repeat the sins of 2016. We did not talk about that. But what we have to realize is that when Black people show up, and no disrespect to any of the constituency because it all matters, but when we show up in a real way, real change happens for our communities. When we do not show up, when we sit it out, when we get baptized by misinformation, bad things happen for generations of people. And that's what this election is all about for us. You can say what you want about Donald Trump, say what you want about the Republican Party, but we bear responsibility when we don't show up. I just told you earlier, for the first time in 20 years, African-American turnout dropped off in 2016. We cannot have that. In fact, we can't even have Barack Obama type turnout in 2020. We've got to exceed what we did in 28 and 12 because we just have to know that people who do not look like us or do not care about us, they're going to be motivated times 10, so they're going to see a surge. And so we've got to have an even bigger surge on our side. And if our vote did not matter, if it did not have collective power, there will not be people in rooms who are not in the ones that we in, working day and night trying to take it away. And so if you don't remember anything I said, I'm fine if you didn't, just remember that our collective vote, not just Black women, not just Black young people, but our collective vote, Black men, women, young and seasoned, when we put those things together and we show up, we will have the chance to adjust the tone and temperature in this country for the next 30, 40 years. And guess what? If we don't, the issues we face today will be times 10 on steroids for years to come if we do not show up.
Okay, awesome, awesome.
Susan, we had, and I know Antoine has the ghost. So Antoine, when you have to drop off, I just want to thank you for participating this evening. And obeying me and being one of my best friends, and just keep doing what you're doing. We're so proud of you.
Well, thank you, Miss Cynthia. And I've learned a long time ago, as they say in the Baptist church, to govern myself accordingly when you call.
All right, all right. So thank you again.
Thank
We
you.
have two other questions. Who do you contact if you want to work at the polls?
I was going to say, call the South Carolina Democratic Party or contact one of the campaigns or scvotes.org.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, if you want to be a poll worker.
And then I had a comment here from Jennifer. Don't forget to complete the census at census.gov. We've got to complete that census because she says it determines how we are represented in the state.
Yeah, and I just want to, and I hate to, hijack, but it really does go hand in hand. We gained a congressional seat, that District 7, we gained that seat because of the census. And the census numbers, it impacts us for 10 years. So when we get these numbers in 2020, we won't collect them again until 2030. So we have to live with whatever we turn in by September 30th. So we only have until the end of the month to get as many people counted as we can so that we get the right amount of representation and we get the right amount of money coming into our state. And if there's anything that we know in South Carolina, we need the funds to do what it is that we need to do to meet the needs of all of our people.
All right, so how do we engage our first-time voters? I'm going to come back to you, Dr. Reed, because I know education is your thing. You're passionate about it. How do we reach them?
It is so exciting to vote for the first time. I remember, now I'm a little older, but I do remember when I was 18 and I could vote for the first time. It was just so much joy and pride in my heart that the voice that I had within me, I could use to decide who represents me. Say, oh, you want my vote? Oh, why? What does it mean? So it just feels good to be able to leverage something that I have so that someone else can represent me in a way that would improve my entire life. So young people, I think we need to express to these young people how their lives will be impacted in all the different facets that we talked about, whether it's education, judicial system, all of those, the infrastructure, they're on their cell phones, are they not? I mean, how many times do we, call them to ask them how to do something on the cell phone or the computer? But without the infrastructure for internet access, wherever they may go, that's why you vote. You vote so you can have these luxuries and necessities. Well, right now it's a necessity. You can have these necessities and you don't have to struggle. We were not meant to struggle.
Add on to that, did you see that excitement that Jennifer had? That's the excitement that we all get when you get a chance to vote for the first time. And so that is actually the perfect response, because studies have shown, and that's why you keep hearing Jennifer talk about it, Antoine and I talk about it. We need to get people registered to vote, because studies have shown the first time that a person registers to vote, they are more likely to go to the polls and exercise that right. And so that's why we're always preaching, are you registered to vote? Get people registered to vote. It's really not a broken record, because the facts are there. The studies have shown that whenever people register to vote, they're more likely to vote in the next upcoming election. And that excitement that Jennifer just exhibited, I had that same excitement, when I was 18 years old and got a chance to vote. And I know that many of the people that are watching tonight, I'm sure, share that same excitement. So it's really, really important for young folks and just really everybody to get registered to vote.
And I
Awesome.
know we can't go to restaurants and sit down like we, used to in a normal fashion, but my family and I, we would go to breakfast. We would vote and then go out to breakfast every election day. So it is extremely important in your family to create these moments so that you never forget them and you make it a part of the norm. So it is not just something you do occasionally. This is normal behavior for people in our home. So I just think to create some of those memories, do something special, whether you have cupcakes or muffins or something in the morning, since we can't go to breakfast, but just find something that makes your family happy, responsible, and just I just can't. I'm just so excited. I don't want to mention my mom who passed last year,
Yeah.
but I have made November 2nd my voting day because that is her birthday. And I really want to vote in October. I really want to vote in October. However, but for this year, November 2nd will be her birthday, so I am going to vote on that day in honor of her. And because it was it was no excuse. I don't care where I was. If I were out of town, I would have to come back home to cast my vote. Then I could go back.
I love it. I love it.
Well, I
And
just
it, and
wanna
it
add-
sounds like it creates generational traditions too. You're just making me excited. Yeah.
It does. I just want to add, Jennifer, November 2nd sounds like the perfect household voting plan.
Right.
I'm excited.
We will honor Miss Clyburn on that day.
I'm gonna wear her jewelry on that day.
Yeah. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you, I know we don't have Antoine on now, but I wanted to see how has it impacted you that Kamala Harris has been selected as the first African-American female candidate for vice presidency. Talk to me a little bit about how that's impacted you and personally, and what it's really done. What does it really mean to you?
Wow. I'm going to try not to cry. Representation really, it really matters. And so I am raising a daughter, and I have to share this experience, this experience with you. My daughter and I said, hey, Kamala Harris is in town. I want you to come and, hear her speak. And so we got there. We were awestruck, just by her presence. She's a wonderful speaker. We know she can handle her business and cross-examine anybody here on the face of this earth successfully. But I got a big lump in my throat because as she was walking in the line and just meeting some of the guests, she had gotten to my daughter, and my daughter kind of started to tear up. And she just said to the senator, she said, I just never thought in my lifetime I would see anybody that looked like me who would be running at the time she was running, of course, for president, to be running for the highest office in this land. And she just said, I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the sacrifice that comes with it, because representation, it matters. And so while Jennifer is the educator here, I used to teach kindergarten and in first grade many moons ago, in the prehistoric days, and just the impact that it has on little girls, black and brown, around this world. As a mother, as a former teacher, it's really special. It's really special. It's historic, but it's really special. And it's also a beacon of light. Sometimes we don't see that little light at the end of the tunnel. Things can look very dismal, we think that the world is not getting better. And then Kamala Harris comes along and Joe Biden selects her as his VP pick. It's just a very special moment, you know, in history for me. And I'm going to stop because I'm getting choked up already about it. And, you know, and another great thing is seeing women really have her back. No matter where they stand, but, you know, we have her back. And that's been seeing that has also been a real breath of fresh air, and just the possibilities that in November when we elect, you know, Joe Biden and Senator Harris as the next vice president of the United States, it's going to be pretty special, and that should be enough for all of us to get out and vote.
And Susan, we have one last question. Should we be concerned about Kanye West on the ballot?
I'll take that one if you don't mind. I think that what we have to look at is each individual candidate and what that candidate has to offer as it pertains to representing your family's needs. And if you can take a look at the Biden-Harris ticket and the Trump-Pence ticket and the Kanye West, I'm not sure who his candidate is for vice president, and look at that ticket, and of those three options, and you can say that he will represent your family in a way that will bring resources in so that you are not on the struggle bus, then by all means, you do what it is that you need to do for your family. But as for me and mine, I'm going to need equity in education. I'm going to need infrastructure. I'm going to need a tax system that is fair and equitable. I'm going to need a whole list of things that I have not seen other candidates provide. The Biden-Harris ticket, well, the Obama-Biden ticket brought us out of a recession in 2008. Where are we right now in dealing with this pandemic? I have to choose the team that has the experience of pulling us out from under and bringing us back to where America needs to be. But that's just me.
Awesome. Awesome. Other thoughts?
Let's see, no. Oh, that was my comment. I was like, oh, what's that question? That was my
I think, Miss Susan, we're at the end of our time together. If you want to wrap it up and thank our panelists, and I see Pastor Davis is here, if he would like to come in after you finish with any comments.
Well, first, I want to say thank you. Thank you for participating in this voting forum. Of course, Dr. Walters, thank you for inviting me and allowing me to moderate. Thank you for Dr. Reed sharing your thoughts, your ideas. Cynthia, thank you for sharing. I feel like I already know you, like Dr. Walters does, like we're all girlfriends. But I think it's been truly a pleasure. It's been a great opportunity to share ideas. It's been a great opportunity to get folks excited about what's happening in November, getting us prepared, coming up with our household plans, getting ready in September so we can act in October, so that we can be intentional. So that's been exciting. So again, Zion Baptist Church, thank you for allowing me to participate in such a forum. I will now hand it over to, I believe, Pastor Davis, who's going to provide us our closing words.
Grace and peace be unto you, all of God's children. Certainly, I was blessed by the panel tonight. I want to say thank you to our social and civic ministry. Thank you, Dr. Walters, Deacon Herbert Barnett, and to Ms. Flossie Hall for preparing this voting form. Thank you to our moderator, Ms. Susan Burroughs, and to the panelists who have done a magnificent job expressing the importance of voting, to Dr. Jennifer Clyburn Reed, and to Ms. Cynthia Watson, and to Mr. Antoine C. Wright in his absence. Certainly voting is a very important topic, and from a biblical perspective, Jesus the Christ was passionate concerning matters, social matters and civic matters, such as provision for the poor, such as health for the unhealthy, and such as justice for those who experience injustice. And when it comes to voting, voting is a way that the faith community can put their faith into action. And so I echo what the panelists have said today. I encourage all South Carolinians to vote. I encourage our friends and our brothers who are viewing Facebook Live in North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, and throughout these United States of America to vote. I want to conclude by way of prayer tonight as we close this voting form. Gracious and merciful God, a God of information, a God of inspiration. You are a God of provision, and you are a God of proclamation. Thank you, God, for providing African descendants the courage to fight for voting rights. Help us, oh God. Help every race, help every gender. Help us, oh Lord, to put our faith into action. Lord, help us to continue to put our faith into action by expressing our voice through voting. We know from your word that social matters and social concerns matter to you, Jesus. And so may the grace of God and the sweet communion of the Holy Spirit rest, rule, and abide henceforth and forevermore. And all of God's people said amen.
Amen.
God bless you all. God bless you all.
Thank you. Thank you
Bless
so
you.
much
Yes.
for having me. Totally enjoyed this.
Yes, this is awesome.
Yes.